Washington state Democrats on Tuesday passed a bill out of the Senate Government, Tribal Relations, and Elections Committee, dubbed by critics to be the initiative killer. Here with more on this is the Center Square's Washington reporter, Carlene Johnson. Carlene, what would the bill change regarding Washington's initiative process?
It would be pretty dramatic, the changes. And just for a little bit of backdrop, in Washington state, the initiative process and the right to the initiative process is built into the state constitution, Article 1, Section 2. And it basically, gives an individual or a person who wants to work with an organization the right to go to the Secretary of State, file intentions to try and get a law changed or amended or overturned, or even a new law. So that is built into the Constitution, basically as a check and balance, right, against the legislature. And Senate Bill 5382 would make some really dramatic changes to the current law, which of course would then require a constitutional amendment, right? The bill directs the Secretary of State in validating the signatures to verify the address that is listed by the person on the initiative of the referendum. Critics say the issue with that is that person might have just moved and they might be putting their current address, on the petition, and the Secretary of State has a different address for them on file. It shouldn't really be an issue if they're in fact a valid registered voter in the state of Washington, but that would be an invalid signature. And the other big issue with it is something that's called false reporting. And that means that the signature gatherer would have to sign a declaration on every page saying that, I swear to the information that is written here on it. I know it's accurate. And they also can't be paid for their signature, the person. Well, signature gatherers don't pay a person to gather signatures. But the signature gatherer themselves might be paid by an organization like Let's Go Washington, which was behind the initiatives that passed in 2024, or 3 of the 7 initiatives that passed in 2024. So it would put a real big burden, critics say, on the signature gathering effort and really just kind of, stifle that opportunity. And even the Secretary of State told some local television stations in Washington this week, and he's a Democrat, Steve Hobbs. He said, no, anything that is going to put more of a burden on the voter to exercise their constitutional right is not something that he supports. But at this point, it has, passed out of committee. So it's going to be interesting because the fight is far from over in Olympia.
So what's the motivation for this?
Yeah, as I mentioned, those ballot measures from last year, everything from, returning the right for police pursuits, the income tax, repealing of the Climate Commitment Act, or an attempt to, that one didn't go through, the Parental Bill of Rights. There were 6 initially gathered signatures for that went to lawmakers for the 2024 session. They ended up adopting 3 of them. The one to ensure no income tax, the one to restore police pursuits, and the one for the Parental Bill of Rights, Initiative 2081. So it took up a lot of time and effort and, the debate clock, if you will, in Olympia. And majority Democrats ultimately agreed to pass those 3 I mentioned. The other 3 went to voters, and then eventually Initiative 2066 to retain natural gas as an energy choice also went to voters. That one passed. The other 3 were rejected in November. But it sucked up a lot of the time in Olympia, and majority Democrats didn't like that. And so critics, including every Republican who, opposed Senate Bill 5382, say, you just didn't like the measures that came. Now, keep in mind, oftentimes there are initiatives that are brought to the people by majority Democrats, including an initiative a few years ago, 1639, that contained a suite of gun control measures that ended up getting those through. And the former Attorney General, now Governor Bob Ferguson, had to fight to, protect that one. But now they want to undo the initiative process. And this is one of the most contentious issues during this 2025 session for sure.
So what happens if this ends up passing?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. If this thing ends up going through, and it very well may end up getting passed, but it would also require it to go to voters. And you're going to have 2/3 of people supporting these great changes to the initiative process before it could be approved, because it would require a constitutional amendment. So you'd have to have 2/3 of lawmakers saying yes to this because it's a constitutional amendment. And then it would have to go to voters to say, yeah, we agree with them. We want to amend this and kind of change how the initiative process works in Washington. That's a heavy lift. That is very unlikely to happen, because even many, Democrats, as I mentioned, the Democrat Secretary of State in Washington, Steve Hobbs, say, the power ultimately rests with the people to hold government accountable. And one of the ways, that Washington voters have for that is the initiative process, making that very, very difficult for people and probably not willing to sign something if they might get in trouble for it, or go out and gather signatures if they're going to get in trouble for it. Mind you, they're up to a year in jail is included with that penalty for the false reporting. You're really going to quash, people's ability to go out and gather those signatures. So even though the bill may go through, which is going to be a big enough issue in and of itself, it would be unlikely, I would think, that voters, 2/3 of voters across the state of Washington would be willing to, amend the state constitution. This could be just the first try, and then they come back and make some changes to this bill in subsequent sessions. And maybe it becomes more palatable at that point. But it's just dramatic that it's gotten already to this point, and it's a testament to, the power of the initiative. So we're going to be watching it really closely.
Well, Carlene, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.